Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 64 of Confessions of a Market Maker. I'm your co-host, Ray, aka All Day Ray, aka Paulie Walnuts, and I'm joined here by my captivating co-host, former market maker, 20 years, and current day retail trader. I'm talking about House Street's own chameleon. He could fit in anywhere from the White House to the Trap House, a former nightclub bouncer who's still awaiting his induction into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. I'm talking about the gorilla of House Street, JJ. How's it going, man?
Good, brother. How you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. Excited for our guest today, a former Barings Bank derivatives trader, a man who developed a superstar reputation trading the futures market on the Singapore Monetary Exchange. A mistake that resulted into a 20K loss compounded into a $1.3 billion loss, resulting in the collapse of one Britain's oldest bank. Our guest today has proved his resiliency, though. He wrote a book on his experience and got it turned into a film. He now consults for firms raising risk awareness around human behavior, culture, conduct, and corporate governance issues. Of course, I'm talking about the Rouge Trader, Nick Leeson. Nick, how's it going, man?
It's going very well. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us, Nick. We want to have you on to kind of talk to, obviously your experiences, some of the events going on this year in 2021, some of maybe the lack of risk management going on. But before we jump into that, I want to ask you, I've seen researching that you were the GM for Galway United Football Club from 05 to 11. How does Rouge Trader become a GM for a football club?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I moved to Ireland in 2003, not for any other reason than I met my current wife. So I've been here for 18 years or so now. So I wasn't trying to run away or anything like that. And then, I'm sort of sat in the west coast of Ireland. There's no futures exchanges around here. There's not a great deal of trading. So you kind of try and work out what you want to do. And I've always been really fortunate in the jobs that I've done in my life, which probably number 2 or 3, I've always really enjoyed, and they've been something that I've been interested in. So financial markets back in the time when I was in Singapore. And then the only other thing that's really stayed with me from a young age to now is soccer, as you would call it, or football as I would call it. So, looking for a job around Galway or something to get interested in, the only real option was soccer. And it wouldn't be, it'd be very much the poor relation in this country. You've got Gaelic sports and you've got rugby that would come ahead of football. So it was testing, but it was enjoyable. And you're meeting the players, you're dealing with the players on a daily basis, and you have to deal with the fans every now and again when the results aren't going too well. But it's not like managing Manchester City or Arsenal or Manchester United. Right. It's on a much lower scale than that.
Yeah, awesome. Neat experience. Just a reminder to the listeners, if you guys would like to join JJ, myself, and a supportive community of traders, you join us at microefutures.com. Nick, before the big blow up, you developed for yourself a great reputation, that let you get away with hiding the losses for as long as you did. Before that happened, I want to ask you, what was the lifestyle like during those early days in Singapore? You're making money, you're an expat. What was that?
Well, look, it's not as wild as you would expect, right? The first thing was I'd worked in Hong Kong and Indonesia for a while for Barings, and I'd worked in Japan for Morgan Stanley. So I'd been around, and I was still only 25. So I was 25 when I moved to Singapore. So for me at that age, what I craved more than anything else was the opportunity. So when the opportunity came up at the age of 25 to move to Singapore, I actually took a pay cut because I wanted the opportunity more than I wanted the money. And the way that I viewed Asia at the time was that if you wanted to be noticed, it was far better to be a big fish in a small pond than vice versa, which you know, you can imagine would be going on in the US or in the UK at that time at different levels. But if you wanted to make a name for yourself, being out in Asia or South America was one way to do it, because you'd get noticed quicker. You'd get noticed quicker by the more senior people within the organization for decisions that you were taking. So, you know, when I first moved to Singapore, and for your viewers who know the area, I wasn't living on Orchard Road and, you know, living in the nicest penthouse on Orchard Road. I was living in Bukit Timah, which is a nice area, but it was out by the race course. It was, you know, it was half an hour out of the city centre. You didn't really see financial or people from the broking industry, expats living out in that area. You'd certainly see expats, but they wouldn't normally be from the market. So, and then it was a case of, you know, making a name for myself. And by the end of it, I was living fairly close to Orchard Road.
Orchard Road.
I wasn't on it, but I was fairly close to it. But yeah, no, look, it's a great lifestyle. You've all got, you know, you've got swimming pools, you've got completely different to the UK, where it's freezing cold and you're getting on the train at 5 o'clock in the morning to be at your desk for 6 o'clock. Singapore has lots of advantages, but you know, I was newly married, so it was good, and it, like the travel and everything else around it was really enjoyable. But it was making a name for myself was, you know, the main reason why I went there.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's good. Sorry, I just a buddy of mine was in Singapore for 10 years. His electric bill was like $5,000 a month just to run the air conditioning, you know. And he was on Orchard Road because he was a big wig at RIM.
Right.
And you know, it's just amazing how expensive it is to live there. You know, any tax haven. So, but yeah, no, that's interesting how you started out.
Yeah, like I don't even. I'm trying to think when I first went there, when I took the pay cut, did I actually have a housing allowance? I probably did, but it would have been something small. And we're talking about, I don't know, the best part of 25, 30 years ago now. So, you know, my housing allowance at the beginning might have been a couple of thousand Singaporean. By the end, it was 8,000 Singaporean, and that was the distance. Or maybe that's US or pounds, but it was, you know, that was the difference between living out on Bukit Timah and living on Orchard Road, which was expensive.
Mm-hmm. Now, Nick, when you went out there, speaking to like the trading atmosphere, this was a new market, correct? It kind of had a bit of a Wild West atmosphere to it, didn't it?
Well, look, I mean, Indonesia did when I lived in Indonesia. Indonesia was a dangerous place. We had a bodyguard, and his name was Tino, and he carried a gun, and he'd come everywhere with us. So he'd pick us up from the hotel in the morning, he'd deliver us to the office, and then he'd pick us up and take us back. And I was in Indonesia for about 15 months all told. Singapore's nothing like that, but from a market perspective, it was still quite new. The Singapore International Monetary Exchange, they only really had one good product, which was the euro dollar. So, you know, in order to make it 24 hours, people would be trading it on the CME, CIMEX, and possibly in the UK at that time. But yeah, that was the only product they had. The Nikkei 225 had started, or Nikkei 225 futures started trading just before I went there, but the volumes were low. There wasn't a great deal of open interest. So if you were going to, you know, and that was what people used to look at. I don't know how much they look at it these days, but if you had no open interest and you had no volume, nobody was going to go there. So, you know, I was a bit of as much as I benefited throughout that period, I was also a godsend for the exchange, because volume went from 2,000 contracts a day up to 30,000 contracts a day. And, you know, I was a large part of that for a while. And, you know, with my good trading and with my illegal trading as well.
Yeah. And Nick, before, I mean, this whole fiasco started with, you know, just a 20K mistake. And, you know, with the type of money that you guys were dealing with, that's nothing that wasn't recoverable. And a mistake that I would imagine wouldn't happen nowadays as well with the electronic trading. Could you just tell us about that first mistake that eventually compounded?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, you hope it doesn't happen these days, but through speaking to people who work in banks, there's always trades that go wrong. There's always errors that need to be corrected. You would imagine that it's done a lot quicker these days. It was an open outcry market, as you would find in Chicago, and everything was done by paper. So it was a case of, you write your trade out, you give the slip to your runner, the runner runs back to the PC, he inputs the details, and hopefully that matches the other side of the trade. What happened in Singapore at the time was that they weren't ready for the increase in volume. So there weren't enough people looking after the exchange floor. The settlement system, the clearing system wasn't ready for this big surge in volume. And so what happened in that sort of 92 to 93 period was the Japanese market was collapsing. There were circuit breakers kicking in Japan. So you would find that the market wouldn't open in Japan, or wouldn't open for maybe 5 or 6 hours of the trading day, and all of the volume would shift to Singapore. So there was this huge increase in volume and no infrastructure to deal with it. So, you went from matching a trade within 30 minutes, which is the norm, to often taking 12 to 14 hours to match those trades, because the settlement system would be down. And it was often 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning that you realized that you had a problem. And so one of the girls who was very, very new to Barings at the time, we'd only just recruited her, she had to pick up the phone one day. It wasn't what she was supposed to do, but the orders were coming in thick and fast. She hand signaled the wrong way to the floor. And so it was about 4 o'clock in the morning that we realized we had an error. And then, you can't do anything with it at 4 o'clock in the morning. So, you're supposed to refer it up the line. I went some of the way in doing that, but, it was a very different, time. I think, and JJ will probably confirm this, back in the 90s, we were all great at celebrating success and talking about success, but nobody spoke about failure.
Exactly.
It wasn't something you showed. Go on.
Exactly. Our head trader would, the head trader of our firm would hide bad trades because, see, in Vancouver, we had 13-day settlement, right? And so he would hide trades under his blotter, his desk blotter. And, we'd always be trying to look for trades. And that was before ACT was invented with US market makers. So the trade reconciliation girl would be going nuts trying to find these trades, like Knight Capital's calling out, we sold them 2,000 shares of Microsoft. Where the hell's the ticket? And everything was paper. And so people would hide trades all the time. People would stuff trades in other traders' inventories or in house inventories, and they wouldn't be found out until quarter end, when they did the audit. And it's actually because of you that I saved our firm a massive, massive debt, which would have spiraled into millions, because they made a Forex mistake on a arbitrage trade between a US and Canadian exchange.
Right.
And, they were hiding this thing for a couple of weeks, and I saw it ballooning, and I said, hey, look, man, I just watched Rouge Trader. You guys can't do this. This is not going to go well, right? This is not going to go well. And I've used you at least 3 times to keep firms out of capital, losses. They should be thanking me and thanking you. But brokerage firm owners are like pimps. They don't really, we're just, they use us until we're done, and then they take half our earnings, and when you take a loss, you get the whole loss, right? So I've always referred to brokerage firm owners as pimps, and so it's because of you that firm, we probably would have ended up with a $15 to $17 million loss that
Right.
ballooned out of maybe 30 grand, just the same way. The trader who made the mistake didn't want to own it and just kept putting that trade in different inventories. It's quite amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the thing that people don't realize, that, like, Nick, this was a common practice, right? Like, you weren't the only one who was hiding money, correct, in other accounts.
Yeah, I just went bigger and longer than most people, unfortunately. You know, it's and I don't totally mean that in a frivolous way, but you're right. You know, like, we're all human beings, and you know, we're all influenced by what we see and what we hear. So, you know, like me as a young guy starting out in the city at the age of 18, I worked for Coots and Company, which is the Queen's Bank and looks after the royal family's money. So I worked for them for a couple of years. It's more of a retail, high-end retail banking operation. I then worked for Morgan Stanley, which was, you know, a quite tightly knit, well-run operation. And then, you know, Barings was completely different. At Barings, on a daily basis, you would see people put trades in error accounts. They might stay there for a day, they might stay there for a week, they might be even longer. But, you know, it kind of, when it came to when I found myself in a situation where I had a trade that I didn't really want, and you're going through the thought process, and we're all, you know, everybody who works in banking is intelligent, you know, they might not have a lot of common sense, but, you know, academically they're good. And you know what the process is, you know how you're supposed to refer it up the line, but still it's a dilemma, right? Because
exactly,
you know, you're going back 30 years or so, and you didn't show weakness. You know, everything.
exactly.
If you wanted to survive, you had to be strong. You had to be stronger than anybody else. You didn't have to step on people, but you had to be strong. And you know, you probably had to give the impression that you would step on people, but you didn't have to do it. And it was, you know, you just didn't show weakness. And for me, you know, I was 25 years of age. You know, I looked at, you know, telling people what was going on as a sign of weakness, whereas I should really have seen it as a sign of trying to do things correctly. And, you know, told everybody up the chain what had happened. Now, the girl who made the mistake, she might have lost her job. That was the thing, that was the personal dilemma for me. And was probably, you know, it was probably the overarching reason, but not the sole reason why I didn't refer it up. And then all of a sudden, once you cross that line, you know, you're part of the problem, and you're more associated with the issue than you were at the beginning. And you know, then it starts to mushroom out of control. You know, you might be lucky, and day 2, day 3, you get all of the losses back, but then it's, you know, then things have happened to you psychologically. Like for me, I think the first losses went into the trading account in, you know, maybe July or August 1992. May of 1993, the loss had been up to $20 million. I managed to get it all back. I had the most perfect expiry in the options, in the May options, and genuinely went home that weekend thinking my life can start again.
Yeah.
But the problem is, because you haven't got a properly run organization, you know, all of the losses are going into the 5/8 account. If the order fillers make a mistake, I just hoover that up. It's a catch-all account, so there's no, you know, no losses are being recognized anywhere, and so you go home and that creates a behavior and a framework that's just, you know, that's just wrong. And then you know, you go home that weekend, you've got this 20 million back, you're actually in profit, so you book that off to somebody else. And then you arrive back on Monday morning, and as much as you've got the losses back, nothing else changes.
Exactly.
So the order fillers make mistakes, you put them back into the 5/8 account, and then you know, and then from that situation in May 1993, it just gets more and more out of control. You know, I get more and more out of control. It's in terms of the way that I'm living my life and surviving, and it is just survival. And what happens to you personally, the more that you know, somebody isn't telling you that something's wrong, that they're not doing the checks, they're not challenging what you're doing, you start to believe you've got more time to correct the situation.
Exactly.
However forlorn that may look, right? You
Well,
still think, you look for this tiny positive
piece of
says
light.
you maybe, yeah, that you
Yeah.
know, even if there's this slightest glimmer
Exactly.
that you've been able
Exactly.
to solve
Oh
the
yeah,
situation.
we've all been there. And the reason, another thing that we did because of you, is we instituted a rule: as soon as a trader got himself into trouble, we take that trade away from him and give it to somebody else who's not emotionally connected with it.
Yeah.
And that saved us a lot of money, and that's directly because of because of you. Because once you start digging that hole, yeah, man, it goes from a shovel to a backhoe to a cat D8, and you're, next thing you know, you're in the Grand Canyon. And because those trade evers, they never work out to your favor. I mean, that's just the Murphy's law or whatever it is. But they never, you never get a trade error where you make 10 million bucks. That's just you never see that, right?
No, I need one, but
Yeah.
you never see them.
You never see them, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think JJ kind of goes to we were talking yesterday, Nick, with a mental game coach for traders, high performance athletes, etc. And I thought he put it well, JJ, when he was saying that trying to dig yourself out of losses or things of that nature, when you're emotionally charged, it shuts down higher brain functioning. And so it's like that wish, that hope that we can make it back, et cetera, et cetera. And I know, Nick, that you've studied psychology and human behavior. Maybe like in an academic sense, where do you think maybe you went wrong in psychology terms, maybe mentally or human behavior?
I don't know. I don't necessarily. I probably don't think about it in those terms. I do a lot of after dinner speaking and talking at conferences and stuff like that. I view everything quite non-academically, if you like. It's just trying to look and understand. I wouldn't say that I'm a highly intelligent individual, but I'm an intelligent person, and it's about. I think the one thing that prison really did for me, because I was in prison in Singapore for 4.5 years, is you kind of have to have a really long, hard look at yourself. And I spent 4.5 years writing a diary, a page a day about things that were triggering memories in me, and you're trying to work out why you did certain things. Look, fear of failure was the biggest thing for me. I was somebody that from a very young age enjoyed success in everything that I did, be that sport or be that academics within school. And I was always pushed. My mother always wanted me to achieve more than she did, have a more stable life and, better career prospects. So I was always very, very success driven. Wasn't money driven. Money comes with it. But the success was the key for me. And, always, I never had a situation where I couldn't go to the next stage. So I had a very exalted opinion of what success looked like. It was very much being at the top of the organization, making the big decisions. And I didn't have a problem with that. And with that huge desire and need for success, there was a massive fear of failure. Failure wasn't something that I did. I hadn't encountered it. We didn't speak about it. And that was just the environment that I was working within at that time. I mean, and there were many US market makers that I don't know if we had any Canadian ones. CRT were Chicago Research and Trading were down in Singapore at the time. And you can imagine, you market closed, you go down to Boat Quay for a few beers and they'd all be telling you about these wonderful trades that they had during the day. Nobody tells you about the shit ones that go wrong, and there's plenty of those as well. But, it was always that one-upmanship. If you had made 50 grand off of a trade, rest assured somebody had made 52 or 55, complete and utter BS. But that's the environment. And it is, it's just, I don't know. It's like those stories that you see, my dad does this, well, my dad does this type
Exactly.
of thing. That's what it was like.
I know. Yeah, it was just we had a lot of that too, uh, because it was just, yeah, it's true. And then it's funny though when other people, when the whole market is bad, then that game becomes, I lost this much. Oh, really? I lost this much, and it's, you think you had a bad day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not too many who speak about their bad days. I don't think there's always, like if it was a bad day, it's always the story about how you rescued it or how you recovered. And
Exactly.
yeah,
I saw it coming. I saw it coming. Really.
yeah.
I told you guys.
Yeah, Nick. I was going to ask you, since you brought up the prison time, I like the quote. I was reading some of the blog on your website. And one of the quotes you had, regarding the prison time, the only thing that got me through those dark days was empowering myself with information and becoming less ignorant and a part of the process of recovering rather than blindly accepting what I was told.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just want to expand on that?
Yeah, well, look, I had cancer whilst I was in prison as well. So, like they call me lucky for a reason. So I was diagnosed with cancer of the colon. So I had an emergency operation whilst I was in prison in Singapore. I also had 6 months of chemotherapy. And like prison, like I'm sure none of you have been to prison. If you have, you don't need to confess to it live on air. But we can say that I have, and I'm alone in that. But it's not an environment where you're really going to benefit from unless you are really prepared to have a long, hard look at yourself. So, everybody and me up until that point, lived a very fast-paced life, very much foot on the accelerator, trying to do everything, and not really, taking any time to look back at what I wanted to achieve or what I would prefer to be doing. And so prison afforded me that opportunity. So it wasn't just about looking at what went wrong from a business perspective, my home life, other situations that I found myself in, and really being honest about it. So you have to pull back the veneer, really look inside at yourself, come to the conclusion, as I did during that time, that you don't particularly like what you've become, and then seek to change from that point. But without that reconciliation, if you like, without that real fairly aggressive look at what you had become, that's difficult to do. So, I, as I've mentioned already, in working or speaking on the speaking circuit, you do come across some of the other rogue traders that are out there. And some of them blame the banks, they blame different things for reasons for what happened to them. And I just don't think they've been through that process, because as much as the bank are at fault because their systems and controls are weak, they weren't good enough. It's you taking the trades and you doing the things that are wrong. Where some of that statement comes from that you read is obviously when I was diagnosed with cancer. I was very ignorant to and had no idea about what that meant or what I would be facing. So, I found that you're in a situation, and I think people find this in the world of banking. You go in and see your bank manager, and a lot of people are overwhelmed by that situation. I think medicine is another area where you quite easily get overwhelmed. And so, I was, for a while, I was just, very much a passive recipient of what the doctor was telling me. And then I read a couple of books that a friend of mine in Singapore sent into the prison for me. One of them was Chicken Soup for the Surviving Soul. So, with some stories about people who'd survived cancer once or many times, and had survived and gone on and done other things. So that gives you hope moving forward. And then the second book was Everything You Need to Know About Colon Cancer, a kind of dummy's guide, if you like. But with that and gaining more information and knowledge, rather than being a passive recipient of what the oncologist was telling me, I could challenge him, I can ask him questions, and you feel like you're more of the process. And I think that's psychologically, that is hugely beneficial when you're going through a difficult situation.
Yeah. I think people could say, whatever they like, Nick, about you. I think if anything, it's admirable, your resiliency. I couldn't even imagine the type of anxiety you had to feel. I mean, as a white guy going into an Asian prison, that had to been difficult, dealing with cancer. So I just think your resiliency very admirable.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, I think everybody's images of prison are tempered by some of the TV programs you guys throw out. But no, it wasn't. Look, it was tough, right? It was a maximum security prison. You can't move more than 10 feet than hitting a door or a guard. Very, very strictly controlled. CCTV cameras everywhere. Gurkhas patrolling the walls with guns that shoot on sight. I'd never, ever heard of anybody attempting an escape or even considering how they were going to do it. It was, but it was, for me, the one thing that you have to do in an Asian prison is understand the concept of face. So you have to give face to people, to other prisoners, and that's really just being respectful and understanding the hierarchy. And the strange thing, and this will probably be my last prison story for you, but the strange thing for me, if you can imagine, everybody is a triad gang member. They're all a lot smaller than me, so I wasn't physically worried, and there weren't really weapons and stuff like that. It's very rarely did you see anything that would constitute a weapon. But so you have the generals who run the triad gangs, the leaders, and there'd be maybe 7 different gangs in the prison. But the thing was that because of my crime, because it was so, it was in every newspaper story that you would see, the prisoners knew who I was. So they thought I'd stole $2 billion.
Exactly.
So I was this uber criminal.
Right.
And so I was
Dr. Evil.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I don't know if Dr. Evil was appropriate, but no. But I was elevated to general level.
Right.
So it was weird. Like I often when I go around and I'm talking about things, the one of the I was in South Africa many years ago, and I was at a board meeting for a bank there, and the risk managers were just quizzing me about different things. And one of the questions was, what was my biggest attribute that enabled me to get where I got within the world of banking? And I hadn't really thought about it before, but the honest answer is that, I was very socially adept. So I can handle myself in most situations. And prison was no different. So I wasn't going to contradict the idea that I was this uber criminal, because it was keeping me safe.
Exactly.
So why contradict it? Why have to explain to 300 inmates a day that that's not the way? You'd get fed up with the explanation as well. So you might as well roll with it a little bit and allow it to give you a status in prison that enabled you to, just coast along, which is what it did, to be honest. So it's tough.
Interesting that it's interesting that no one came up to you and said, well, you've got 800 million squirreled away in the Caymans.
I don't think they would have known where you squirrel it away, but
at that time, but now I've being a trader in Vancouver, I've traded for pretty much every mobster alive, and from every single continent, and now they're completely much more adept with offshore institutions. I'll tell you that right now.
Oh.
I remember reading, Nick, I guess Bernie Madoff, they viewed him the same way in prison. He said he was like so revered by the other inmates, just because of the dollar amount. I guess
exactly. Yeah,
dollar amount, and they're like,
Yeah,
Like,
I think that's all it is. That's all
yeah,
they see. You know, there's a dollar amount, and they don't understand the story.
yeah,
You know, in Singapore, in Singapore, it was possibly even more weird because, you have probably five Chinese triad gangs. The level of education and literacy amongst those individuals is quite poor.
mhm,
So you couldn't even have a conversation with them. They spoke their dialect, but they would have had very, very little English. So they just left you alone. Nobody, prison's no different to anywhere else. Nobody wants to highlight their ignorance or lack of understanding. And I think, Madoff probably found himself in a situation similar to that. And as you said, it was the only thing they see is the dollar amount. They don't understand why, but they see it. They understand dollars.
yeah,
Except when Canadian stock promoters go to jail, they end up doing deals while they are in jail. And like one guy I know, I mean, they put him away for 8 years, and he managed to sock away about 160 million offshore doing a couple of pump and dumps. And as soon as he got out, he booked it to Dubai, and now he's taking pictures of himself and posting them on Instagram as a wanted guy, and they can't get a hold of him. So, that's the Canadian way.
Yeah. No, look, you used to, during my time in Asia, you'd see some pictures of, people who were in prison in Indonesia, for instance, and they'd be related to, one of the ruling parties. It wasn't really prison. Singapore is definitely prison. You're locked up. You're locked up for 23 hours a day. The walls are, there's 3 people to a cell. It's 9 foot by 6 foot, so there's not a great deal of room. There's a hole in the floor where you go to the toilet. The walls are pristine white. There's no writing on the walls. There's corporal punishment. So if you do anything wrong, they every Friday there is somebody you can get the rotan. So you're tied to a wooden truss. You're stripped. So you have a leather band around your liver and kidney area. And then somebody with the biggest arms in the prison will hit you with 100 strands of bamboo. And during that time, there was actually one American kid, I think he was 16, who was caught for vandalizing a car. And so he spent 6 months in prison, and he was given, he was adjudged to be given 6 strokes of the rotan, but President Clinton intervened, and I think it was reduced to 4. But he did spend 6 months in prison. Now it completely lacerates your backside. There's blood everywhere, and the only way that the guys can cauterize it and stop the bleeding is by sitting directly onto the hot floor.
Wow. So it's not like Goodfellas where Paulie Walnuts is making gravy and slicing garlic.
No.
Okay. All right.
No, even for the guys who've supposedly stolen $2 billion, no, it's nothing like that. You used to get one good plate of food a year. So you used to have to choose what your religious festival, and I'm not religious at all. So on Christmas Day, I would get fried rice as opposed to plain rice.
Plain rice, okay.
Okay, good stuff. Moving on. Nick, how well did the movie Rouge Trader portray reality?
It's a strange one, really. I've only ever watched it twice, to be honest with you. I watched it once when I returned from Singapore. I watched it with Sir David Frost, who made the movie. His production company made the movie, and there was I'm trying to think of the other guy's name who was there. The guy who played Gandhi in the movie. What's his surname? Ben. Can't think of his name at the moment.
Ben. Oh yeah.
Ben Kingsley, is it?
Ben Kingsley, yeah.
Yeah. So the two of them had a showing of the movie in Ladbroke Grove in London. So there was about 50 of my friends came up on a bus from where I would have lived, about 30 miles outside of the city. and you know, some people were laughing, some people were crying. I was having a few beers with Sir David Frost, which was surreal anyway. I don't remember all of it. I think that, you know, there's lots of parts that are exaggerated. There's lots of parts that are dumbed down, so that a very general audience can understand it. There are parts that ring true, and there are parts that are completely fanciful. You know, I think and one part that people often refer to me at the end of the movie, I'm fleeing Singapore in a beat up old car, and you know, like I drove to the airport in the Mercedes that I had in Singapore, and you know, so you know, if it's not even a close reflection, it just doesn't stay with me. The second time I watched it was with my current wife, and you know, again, I'm sure that, like, my youngest son is 16 and a half now. I'm sure he'll want to watch it at some point, and yeah, it's a weird one, right? I don't know. It must even be weird for Ewan McGregor, because not often do you do you have to portray people who are still alive?
Yeah.
You know, normally movies are many years later.
Yeah, I feel it would be weird having a movie about yourself, Nick, right? But a movie about an infamous event in a painful time in your life, right? It's cool to have a movie, but at the same time, it's about that. I mean, how are your feelings on that?
Yeah, it doesn't really bother me, to be honest. It's kind of, you know, you have to embrace the whole situation in order for you to move on. So, you know, when you stand up on a stage in front of people and you're telling a story, you know, you either tell the truth or you don't. And I think if you don't tell the truth, and if you're making stuff up, people will see through you really quickly, and it will come across as the fake event that it is. So, you know, I always try to be completely honest and completely real about everything. And so the movie's a part of that, you know, whether it's a true adaptation or not, it's there. And that sort of stuff doesn't really bother me. You know, it probably affects my wife and children more than it does me. And that, for that reason, it can be an issue. But for me personally, you know, I remember once I was on a radio program many years ago for a guy called James Whale, who's a bit of a shock jock in the UK, lovely fella, and we still talk to this day. But I was on his program late at night one time, and one of the viewers phoned in and said, "Nick, I've just bought your mum and dad's old house. Should I dig up the garden?" You know, suggesting that that's where I'd buried the money. But, you know, like, it comes with the territory, right? If you know, I don't mind. I might be out for a drink or something with my wife, or going for something to eat in town, and you know, somebody might have a few digs about something, and that's okay. I'll let them get away with 2, maybe 3, but the 4th one, they're going to get one back.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of, there's a time and a place, right? So if I'm at an event and I'm talking and people want to ask me questions, and even if somebody wants to have a dig, that's fine, right? That goes with the territory. I'm getting paid for speaking. I don't mind. If I'm out for dinner with my wife and you want to have a pop at me, you know, like, I'll let you get away with it once or twice, but, you know, 3 times the charm, and you're going to get some back.
Absolutely. Nick, have you come across any other traders during that time period? I think back, Jane, I was just thinking, we had on Nick, his name's Jason Shapiro. He was actually profiled in the New Market Wizards book by Jack Schwager. And he said he profited off of this event. He brought you up. That once this came to light, I guess once it started hitting like the newspapers and stuff, I forget exactly, Jay, how he said, but once the news came out, he said that the trade was so obvious for him. I forget, long or short, whatever it was. Have you ever talked to any other traders that maybe profited, or were just like what their perspective was during this time?
Yeah, not really. I mean, there were lots of rumors circulating in the market, probably from about December 94 through to February 95, when the bank collapsed. So it's really strange. Just in the last few weeks, since I've been a bit more active on social media, there's a few people that were in Singapore at the time making contact. So it's a really weird, it's 25 years later or whatever. So there was a guy who used to run Goldman's in Singapore. And Goldman's offloaded the positions. So, as they often do when something like this goes on. So yeah, look, the trade I think was quite, everybody knew what the positions were. They were coming to the market. They were going to hit bids. In terms of the unwinding that needed to be done, or lift offers if there were any long positions that needed to go. So you could certainly skew the prices that you were looking for. So I would imagine it would have been an easy trade. But yeah, some of the market makers that I knew from the time, or I've not spoken to in 25 years. Have made contact in the last few weeks, and one of them's in New York, another one's in Chicago, working with one of the exchanges down there. So, life goes on, and I don't have any anger or any resentment. It was, everything at that time that led to my demise was of my own doing, and. You kind of, as long as you can accept that and take that on the chin, you can move forward. It's, as soon as you start blaming people and getting angry, you're just going to be bitter and twisted for the rest of your life. There is really no point to that sort of route or choices for you going forward. Yeah.
And back in the old days too, I mean, the way we used to say it is, during the daytime, during market hours, you'd cut each other's eyes out for an eighth, right? Yeah. But when your girlfriend kicks you out of the house at night, one of the boys will take you in and let you sleep on the couch. Right? That's the way it was, right? There was, during market hours, we were there to rip each other's throats out.
Yeah, like it was a very different time. Like I remember one of my best friends who still is one of my best friends to this day, when he was working on Life. There used to be a £500 fine for striking somebody in the pit. He used to prepay the fine.
Oh yeah.
So he would go and pay the 500 before he hit the fella.
Exactly.
And give him fair warning. But it was a different time.
Exactly. I mean, how many times have I walked into a room with a baseball bat? I mean, it's just one of those things. You catch somebody shorting one of your clients' deals, and you got to go give them a little, thump.
Oh, it's awesome. I love these stories.
The millennials don't do that stuff. I don't.
No, they just text an angry face.
What are they called now? Generation Z or something? I don't know.
I don't know. I can't keep up with the alphabet, but I think you just text one of those sour face emoji things now, right?
Yeah. Or an aubergine or something. I don't know.
Exactly. Hey, I just found out FOMO is not a stock symbol.
Great. I love the 90s trading stories. Nick, so you consult with firms. This year, we've seen a few blowups from hedge funds. I mean, I think I read JJ now, like Bill Hwang, it's up to like 20 billion. They're saying he lost. Who banks were taking a hit. Melvin Capital got squeezed out of existence. Nick, what have been your thoughts and your reactions to these financial events going on?
Yeah, I don't look at any of them in too much detail, to be honest with you. I think this Robin Hood stuff is, it has been wild for most people. It's certainly something new and something for the markets to get used to. The real, retail traders have always been there, but just the way that they've got together to squeeze some of these positions higher has been something that's never been seen before. The force and the veracity of it has been unbelievable, and fair play to them. I do worry that a short squeeze is one of the they've probably gone from letter A to letter S or T in the learning to trade vocabulary a little bit too quickly, and I do worry that there's some downside coming. brokers and banks will adapt, and they'll be, they're forewarned a little bit now. So I think people should be careful going forward. But I think it's great, like the more retail gets involved, the better information that they have, the fairer the game becomes. Like when I was working on trading floors years ago, we would be ticking prices to trigger stops, and it can be unsavory. And so I think the transparency now is great.
Yeah. Nick, you're talking to JJ. You're talking to one of the most unsavory.
Yeah, I was known as the director of dirty tricks. Here's stop runs were my breakfast. We got to eat, right? Let me ask your take on something. I have a theory of why these blowups are big these days. And I think it's because these firms are now public, and the people who run them aren't partners who have their own money and skin in the game. Yeah. Like when Goldman was 60 really savage old men, and it was a partnership, they would watch the bottom line every night, and they wouldn't let some employee go nuts because it was their own money. Now it's other people's money. It's OPM. And these guys are like, oh, I still get paid my bonus. So it doesn't really matter, or they don't have as much skin in the game. So their risk is like, if we lose $2 billion, it doesn't really hurt me,
Yeah, I think there's a huge part of that. I think, I joined, or I started work in the city around 1985. So 1987 was the Big Bang era. And in the UK, that was the end of, or the start of the end of stockbrokers, which was the way that, everybody had skin in the game.
Yeah.
And you're right, it becomes other people's money. I think the other real thing is that it's become such a big industry. Just looking back at how the city changed over that period as well, you get a lot of people who get paid a lot of money for doing not a great deal in the control functions, and you're not going to get the same sort of money in another industry. So these people get into a situation where they don't want to challenge. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to ask the difficult questions. And it's far easier to pick up your paycheck at the end of the month and let somebody else make the noises. Why show myself out within the organization? And if you think of all the whistleblowers that over the years, and I know it's a little bit different now because there's big payouts for the whistleblowers, but if you go back over the last 20, 30 years and you ask yourself, where's that whistleblower now? They're definitely not working in the world of banking, and they're probably finding it quite difficult to get by.
Mm-hmm. Nick, what do you find a difference? Because with you consulting the firms, what do you find a difference from your time in the 90s? Maybe with I don't know, compliance, risk management, etc. How's it changed from the 90s to now?
Look, there's a huge change. It's far better now. The quality of people in those roles is, the number of people in those roles has increased significantly. I mean, if you walk into Citibank in the city of London, there's 3,000 people in compliance. Now, I've no idea what the 3,000 people in compliance are doing, but there are, banking, if it has a problem or it has an issue, they tend to throw numbers at it. And the number of people has massively increased. The education, the level of professional accreditation within the industry has increased hugely. But common sense probably isn't on the up too much. There's a lot there from an academic perspective, but you really need to know how the organization fits together, how it all works, and work out the way that you can challenge what's going on within the organization. I wasn't challenged, and you still see that occur from time to time. And it is about really understanding what's going on within the organization. I think the Wall Street Journal, when I'm talking about things, the Wall Street Journal years ago used to have a phrase which I use, and I think sums up a lot of what went on at Barings at that time. And the phrase is, knowledge is nothing without understanding. If you don't understand the business, you can't challenge the business, and the business is therefore at risk. Barings was staffed by people who went to the best schools, they went to the best universities, but they really didn't understand the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Barings was just as complicit as yourself in that whole blow up, right? Because there's no way you should have been able to get away with that for as long as you did, correct?
No. I mean, if you just look at the numbers, the capital base of Barings Bank was £250 million. By the end of 1994, I had £600 million with me in Singapore, funding my illegal position. So more than twice the capital base of the bank. The legal limit you can lend to a subsidiary is 20% of a bank's capital. So we're 10 times in breach of that. The bank in London are reporting that to the Bank of England every single day. I think the Board of Banking Supervision report, if anybody cares to read it, there is, the guy who's looking after that particular statistic at the Bank of England, because it's breached every single day for over 2.5 years. They specifically asked him, why hadn't you done anything about it? And his answer, and this is on the report, is that it was too far down in his in tray and he hadn't got around to it yet. So it's not just the bank, it's the regulators. This was for me, this was systemic. Lots of people not very good at their jobs, including me at that time in that particular phase of what I was doing, and nobody can detract from that. It's I don't see. I always come across people from Barings on my talks around the world. You don't come across too many of the senior management because it will highlight, their lack of knowledge and understanding at that time.
Right. And I thought, Nick, that was something the movie did portray well, that it wasn't just you, right? The regulators, the banks, incompetency as well. So I thought that was at least highlighted.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nick, I think a few of the senior guys were quite ridiculed by, they weren't quite that bad, but
Yeah, sure. Okay. Nick, do you have any participation in the markets right now?
I trade every day.
Nice.
I do. Yeah, I still. I trade the indices. I trade the Dow and the DAX, and I trade gold.
Cool.
I don't really go outside of those. I like a bit of volatility. If you don't have volatility, you're not going to make money. No. I tend to trade around the opening bell. So I'll trade the European opening bell and the New York opening bell. And then, I don't want to, I'm not somebody who's looking for a particular trend. It's just, I'm looking for patterns around the open. I think of, my time on the trading floors and the opening orders that come into markets, and I look for patterns around those. It's tougher now with all of the programs that are out there, but I believe programs tend to trigger at the same time of the day, and the first 8 minutes of the opening of the Dow does provide opportunity. If you get it right, you could be completely wrong, but after 8 minutes, I'm out.
Yeah. Exactly, that's trading.
I'm not holding it anymore.
Yeah,
if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
As one of the ladies in our room says, hit it and quit it.
Yeah, in and out. Yeah. So Nick, it's a little different though, huh? Trading as a retail trader, an individual account, as opposed to with the bank's money. How was or was there a difference in your opinion?
Yeah, look, the size is different.
Can't cheat.
The size is different. There's no point hiding anything. I still hide stuff from my wife from time to time, but
just for old time's sake.
No, just because she'll kill me. But and she's a tougher risk manager than anyone I've seen in the past.
Compliance.
Yeah, but look, the monetary size is different. The way that I traded years ago, it would have been there would have been longer horizons on the trade. So, now it is, it's very much a day trade. It's to, I might do 5 or 6 trades around the opening bell, Europe side, probably only 1 or 2 around the US. I genuinely am only looking at that first 8 minutes of trading, really. And then, if, and JJ will tell you this, you can walk into, however right you are, and however well researched you are, and however much your technical analysis is telling you to do something, if you walk into a big trade from JP Morgan, you're just going to get flattened regardless.
Exactly.
I remember on the trading pits, in the trading pits years ago, everybody would be watching what JP Morgan were doing. And if they walk into the pit with a big order, they're just going to, they're going to go through bid after bid after bid. And then when they stop, after they stop, the market will go back to where it was. So let them do their business, and then look to trade. So I'm not somebody who trades around numbers or does anything like that. Going back to the things that I'm looking for, I want some volatility. I'm 54 years of age, right? So I don't want to sit in front of a screen for 10 hours trying to work out when the moon is going to coincide with this technical analysis and that technical analysis. That's, I don't
Venus
have
is in retrograde.
I don't have the time for that. I've got dogs that need walking. I've got to go and get my pension from the post office, and
And here's a tip for compliance. We used to bribe our compliance officers, so maybe once in a while, a little trip to Louis Vuitton or something like that will help your compliance goals.
Yeah. So no, look, when are the markets going to move, right? That's the question I ask myself, right? So I can guarantee you every day the market will move at the open in Europe, and it'll move at the open in the US. So if I focus on those times a day, I'll get enough volatility in that period to hopefully make money. If I get it wrong, I get it wrong, right? But there's going to be enough movement to make a profit and, be content.
No doubt. Nick, appreciate your time. I got two more questions, miscellaneous type of questions, and we'll wrap this up. You have any thoughts and just general takes on cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I don't understand it. I have a bot that trades the cryptos for me. I don't have a big account. It's a really small account, but I think in the last 7 days I was up 25%, down, and then I went from a positive 25% account to a negative 21% account, and it's now up 3%. If there'd been cryptocurrencies when I was at Barings, the bank would have lasted a day. That stuff is bonkers, right?
It is.
It's absolute bonkers. How do you manage the downside? It's great when it's trending. How do people manage the downside? I posted a comment on social media about 10 days ago about Bitcoin being 20% down, and somebody responded to me and said, "Hey dude, don't worry until it's down 60%. Who wants to wake up on a Monday morning and their account's down 60% over the weekend? That's not trading. That's not investing. That is, for me, I don't even know if it's that. It's going into a casino in Las Vegas and putting every coin that you have into a slot machine and hoping something comes out. I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know what it is. It's bonkers. It really is bonkers.
Not how we were trained.
Yeah, it is definitely. If you're looking for,
that's probably how I would have traded.
Yeah.
Go on, and the last one.
Yeah, last one. I saw too. You were on Celebrity Big Brother.
I was, yeah.
In the UK, 2018. What was your experience like on reality TV?
Look, it was a job. I got paid really well for it. And I expected to be the first one out. I was the only one with a criminal record, and I'm sure I've upset a few people along the way. So I genuinely was expecting to be the first person out, but I made it to the final. I came fourth. So Kirstie Alley from Cheers was in it at the time. I think Kirstie came second. So yeah, look, for me it was a 3-4 week return to jail and you know, with some nicer inmates than the last time I went to jail. Better food and a nice pay packet at the end of it. You know, I didn't get anything. I didn't get anything from my 4.5 years in prison in Singapore.
Yeah. Oh, awesome, Nick. Well, that will conclude today's episode of Confessions of a Market Maker. If you guys like the episode, please rate and review it for us. If you'd like to join JJ and myself and a supportive community of traders, we trade futures, equities, options, crypto, NFTs, all at a high level. Come join us at microefutures.com. Nick, let the listeners know where they can find you. Anything else you want them to know?
Oh, I don't know where they can find me. Look, I do have a Twitter account. I do have an Instagram account. What else do I have? I have a LinkedIn account. You can find me there. Ask me what my names are on them. I don't know. I'm the original Rouge Trader on one. I'm sure it's just by my name on the others. But yeah, look, happy to talk to people about anything really.
Awesome. Yeah, make sure you guys go out, buy his books. Watch the movie if you like. JJ, any parting words?
Thank you so much. You know, actually, you know, I grew up in your story really changed the lives of a lot of people that I worked with. So it's amazing meeting you, and thank you for being so forthright about your journey, because you know, everyone, you know, it's easy to get the story from the guy who makes money and flies around in a helicopter and owns football clubs and stuff. But when people come back from, you know, as our friend Fingers says, you know, they come back from, you know, from that depth of emptiness, you know, the darkness, or what does he call it from the movie Wall
Abyss.
Street?
The abyss.
The abyss, you know. It's good to see, because trading is tough. Sometimes you're looking in the mirror going, Jesus Christ, what the hell am I doing? And it's nice to see someone, you know, they've been through the worst, they've come back out the other side, and I think that's, for me, those stories are inspiring, you know, and thank you very much for that.
No problem, guys. Take care.
Absolutely. Bye. I echo that. And so for the Rouge Trader, I'm Paulie Walnuts. He's the gorilla of House Street. Make sure you guys using stop zone.